Today we are going to recap the 2023 film, The Killer. But before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. The movie opens with Chapter 1, set in Paris, where a hitman known only as The Killer sits by a window, deep in contemplation. His timer beeps, almost causing him to doze off. Later he wakes up, still feeling parched, now wearing gloves. He leans back in his chair, puts on earphones, and observes the people outside as they go about their daily routines. He then proceeds to engage in yoga, completes push-ups, and maintains proper posture before eventually stepping out of his room. Descending several flights of stairs, he exits the building, shielding his face with sunglasses and a hat. He scans a bike using his phone and heads to a nearby cafe to pick up some supplies. While on a call, a voice on the other end informs him that his target is expected to arrive soon. Having already waited for 5 days, the killer decides he will wait an additional 2 days. Back in his room, the killer listens as a narrator explains his reluctance to stay in Airbnb rentals due to concerns over hidden nanny cams. He continues to observe the people in the area until night falls, at which point he sets up his sniper rifle, positioning it toward the window. Suddenly, he hears the door behind him open. He quickly prepares for confrontation only to realize it is merely a mail delivery. He narrowly avoids being discovered and resumes his vigil, remaining awake until morning. He reflects on how boredom is one of the most difficult aspects of his profession. His work often requires staging fatal accidents or using slow-acting poisons to eliminate targets while maintaining discretion. As his day progresses, he carefully disinfects the sink and takes a power nap, setting his alarm to wake him at regular intervals so he can check if his target has arrived. Eventually he notices the curtains being drawn at the target's location, and a car pulling up outside. A maid begins preparing the house for an important guest, and the killer once again readies his sniper rifle. He observes a man inside the house and loads his weapon. Adjusting his bed to align with the window, he continues watching as additional people enter the building. He puts on his earphones and attentively watches a woman being escorted into a room. The killer then pulls up the hood of his sweatshirt and mutters a dark phrase, "I don't give a..." His heart rate monitor alerts him as he regains focus, looking through his rifle scope to see his target finally coming into view. When the killer takes his shot, he misses. The target's security detail reacts immediately, shutting the blinds before he can fire again. Realizing that his position has been compromised, the killer moves swiftly. He quickly packs up his gear, puts on a motorcycle helmet, and rushes to his scooter. He speeds through the streets as law enforcement closes in from all directions, disposing of his weapon in a garbage truck while making his escape. Skillfully navigating through narrow alleys and staircases, he evades capture before stopping at a gas station. There he cleans himself up in a filthy restroom. After a rapid makeover, he hails a taxi and heads to the airport. However, while waiting in line, he notices a Belgian Malinois service dog and immediately decides to alter his plan. He takes a moment to clean himself up further, purchases a plane ticket, and contacts his handler to report the failed mission. Boarding the plane, he remains on high alert, noticing a suspicious-looking man. Upon landing at his destination, he once again spots the same individual. When his flight gets delayed, he accepts an airline voucher and spends the night at a hotel. As an added precaution, he places a glass cup on the door handle before settling in for the night. The next morning he quietly leaves the hotel and boards his rescheduled flight. Upon arrival at his next destination, he drives through a scenic area before stopping at a gated property. Noticing boot prints in the dirt, he becomes cautious. He retrieves his pistol, leaps over the gate and sprints ahead, following the tracks. Eventually he reaches a mansion where he is met with a gruesome sight, blood splattered across the property. Alarmed, he quickly makes a phone call before rushing to a hospital that is experiencing power outages. Inside, he finds a woman lying in a hospital bed. Marcus, a trusted associate, delivers grim news. She is in critical condition. Marcus explains that his sister Marilyn described the attackers as a man and a woman. Before taking refuge in a bathroom, she managed to stab the male intruder. Marcus concludes that the two were originally after the killer but instead found his wife. The killer sits beside her as Magdala regains consciousness. Despite her injuries, she assures him that she did not reveal any information about him, even under intense pressure. After hearing this, he leaves the hospital and begins planning his next move. He accesses a hidden underground safe and gathers the necessary supplies for what comes next. The following day, while driving through the city, he spots a car that matches the description of the vehicle that left his home. As night falls, he arranges for an emergency driver. However, when the driver arrives, the killer decides to do his own investigative work instead. He thoroughly searches a database until he locates the individual he is looking for. He sends an ominous package to Dolores and begins staking out a location.
After locating the driver, he trails him before finally requesting a ride. During the journey, the killer taps his pistol against the glass, causing the driver to immediately surrender his wallet. However, the killer has no interest in money. He is after information. The driver, fully aware of the situation, describes the individuals he had previously transported, referring to them as freaks. He explains that he was forced to drive them to an isolated mansion and wait until their work was complete. Once the killer obtains the information he needs, he eliminates the driver without hesitation. He then secures another fake passport and exits the country, making his way to New Orleans. Upon arrival, he stops at a storage facility where he parks his van, collects firearms, switches license plates, and acquires power tools. Spotting a specific woman, he calls her Dolores and begins executing his plan. Disguised as a sanitation worker, he infiltrates a building, silently counting the seconds before the door closes. Timing it perfectly, he slips inside. When Dolores spots him, terror sets in. The killer moves in, confronting Hodges at gunpoint. Recognizing the situation, Hodges immediately instructs Dolores to comply with the killer's demands. After securing Dolores inside a bathroom, Hodges attempts to explain the situation. He insists that he had no choice but to act after the killer's failed assassination attempt. As one of the killer's employers, Hodges claims the only way out is for him to disappear completely. But the killer is not interested in negotiations. He demands to know if there are any backup plans in place. Hodges swears there are none, convinced the killer will not harm him. However, he is wrong. Without a moment's hesitation, the killer shoots him in the chest with a nail gun. Watching Hodges bleed out, the killer coldly informs him that he has 6 minutes to save himself. Hodges, however, collapses within seconds. Now shifting his focus to Dolores, the killer knows she has the information he is after. She agrees to provide the names he seeks on the condition that he does not leave a mess behind. Though his instincts warn him that empathy is a liability, he chooses to let her go. However, the sight of Hodges' corpse causes Dolores to faint. The killer disposes of Hodges' body in a trash container before taking Dolores on a late-night drive. When she attempts to escape, he forces her to help him retrieve the subcontractors' names. She provides him with a key name, Claiborne. With no further use for her, the killer executes Dolores, silently expressing his frustration over the constant need to clean up after others. Afterward, he cleans his van, grabs a meal, and heads to Florida, where he locates Claiborne.
He makes his way to Florida, reaching the address Dolores provided. He surveys the surroundings and waits patiently for nightfall. As darkness settles, he spots a group of men departing the property. He trails them from a safe distance before eventually approaching a house. A large dog immediately begins barking at him. In response, the killer tosses it some food which the animal eagerly devours before retreating to its owner. Once the dog is out of sight, he silently infiltrates the property and finds the dog resting. He moves past it undisturbed and sneaks into the house where the man inside is showering. Carefully creeping toward the bathroom, the killer prepares to strike, but the man unexpectedly catches him off guard. A violent confrontation erupts, tearing through the house as they engage in a relentless struggle. The killer eventually secures the man in a chokehold, but his opponent refuses to submit and continues to fight back. The battle escalates until the killer finally shoots the man, inflicting a fatal wound before delivering the final shot. Before making his exit, he ensures all traces of his presence are erased by setting the house ablaze with a Molotov cocktail. The following day, he boards a flight to New York City. He navigates the city using public transportation and secures a rental car. Upon reaching the suspected residence of the subcontractor, he positions himself at a vantage point and watches the area closely. After resting, he bides his time until nightfall, when he notices a woman fitting the description given by the taxi driver. He watches as she drives away, following at a measured distance. When she finally stops, he mirrors her actions, observing as she enters an upscale waterfront restaurant for a luxurious dinner. Approaching her table with calculated precision, the killer levels his gun at her. The woman, introducing herself as the expert, remains composed but nervous. She inquires whether Hodges met a gruesome fate at the killer's hands. Without offering a response, he listens as she attempts to engage him in conversation. She tries to disarm him with politeness, even offering him food while insisting that she played no role in the attack on his wife. According to her, the brute was the true culprit. However, the killer has already eliminated him. She shifts the conversation to morality and the inherent hypocrisy in their line of work, pointing out that the killer could have assassinated her in countless ways, but instead chose a face-to-face confrontation. Ignoring her attempts at manipulation, he forces her outside, making her walk. She tries a variety of tactics to gain the upper hand, including reverse psychology and feigning an injury, but the killer remains completely indifferent. Without hesitation, he pulls the trigger and executes her. However, his work is not yet done. Another highly influential target remains, presenting him with a more formidable challenge. He initiates surveillance on the target's residence and heads to a parking facility, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Encountering a locked door, he promptly orders a fob copier online and patiently waits for it to arrive. Once the package is delivered, he meets with an arms dealer, securing a full arsenal for the job ahead. Next, the killer heads to the gym where his intended target regularly trains. Disguising himself as a janitor, he gains access to the locker room and discreetly lifts a keycard from the man's wallet. After making an exact copy, he returns the original undisturbed and waits for the perfect moment to infiltrate the building. When the time comes, he enters the parking garage, using the cloned keycard to access the elevator, which takes him directly to the 27th floor. Stepping into the luxurious penthouse, he silently observes as the billionaire Claiborne remains unaware of his presence. Initially believing he is the victim of a simple burglary, Claiborne attempts to negotiate, offering money in exchange for his safety. However, when the killer presents the key card he duplicated, recognition dawns on Claiborne's face. He quickly confesses that Hodges had advised eliminating the killer after the failed assassination attempt. Claiborne insists that he holds no grudge against him, but the killer delivers a final ominous warning. If he is ever forced to return, the outcome will be a prolonged and excruciating demise. Without another word, the killer turns and calmly exits the penthouse, making his way out of the building undetected. For his final destination, he travels to the Dominican Republic. There, he settles into a quiet moment sipping tea with his wife who is now fully recovered, and that is how the story concludes.